Den 9 december 2006 var en stor dag för Sverige. Då hade vi vår första person uppe i rymden, nämligen Chris Hadfield. Då samarbetade vi med Rymdstyrelsen och gjorde en stor utställning kring rymden och rymdfarande. Och vi hade en nedräkning till den här uppskjutningen på plats här ute på Sergels torg. Så när Rymdstyrelsen hörde av sig i våras till oss och sa att i september så kommer det ett 100-tal astronauter till Stockholm, så var vi självklart intresserade av att arrangera någonting tillsammans med dem. Och det har vi gjort. Den här dagen är fylld med rymdarrangemang. Och den startar ju nu här på morgonen helt enkelt. Vi kommer visa sci-fi-filmer i vår biograf. Och vi har en satellit som ni säkert har sett där ute. Och ikväll så har vi ett arrangemang som heter Rymdslottet är live. Är vi framme snart. Där vi diskuterar existentiella frågor, hur stor är rymden, kan vi kröka den, vad är tid och så vidare. Olle Nordberg är generaldirektör för Rymdstyrelsen och vi är glada att samarbeta med er.
God morgon, Olle Nordberg som sagt. Rymdstyrelsen, vi är den svenska myndighet som ser till att vi i Sverige kan dra maximal nytta av rymden. Nu fick vi ju då ett fantastiskt tillfälle när vi även dessutom är värd, en av de värdar som är för Association of Space Explorer. Den förening för rymdfarare som träffas en gång per år och i år då träffas här i Sverige. Det är ungefär 400 medlemmar i föreningen Association of Space Explorers. Varav 100, en fjärdedel, är här i Stockholm just nu. Ni ska strax få träffa dem. Jag måste tyvärr få meddela att Alexej Leonov är sjuk idag på morgonen. Så att han kommer inte vara med här. Men däremot så kommer ni då att få träffa 3 stycken väldigt erfarna och vältaliga astronauter. Det är Cady Coleman från USA, Chris Hadfield från Kanada och Samantha Cristoforetti från Italien. Jag tycker vi ger en stor applåd. Här kommer vi få se.
For coming. You're space royalty. You're some of the finest astronauts on Earth and in space. So thank you again for coming here today and sharing your experiences with us. I'm Beata Wickbom. I'll be the moderator. I don't think that will be a difficult job today because these astronauts have a lot to tell you, and I'm sure that you have a lot of questions as well. And we encourage questions, and there are some microphones for that. Someone's working the floor, Oscar, I think. So please use the microphone so everyone can hear. You may ask in Swedish, and I'll do the translation if that's a problem with the language. And please be generous. Our astronauts, they really like questions because then they know that they're relevant to you, that you get what you came for, so to speak. Chris Hadfield, what's the weirdest question you ever got?
The weirdest question I ever got. Oh, somebody asked me if astronauts can have tattoos or not. What do you think? Yes? Yes, astronauts can have tattoos, yeah.
Was that encouraging me to ask you if you have one?
Samantha, do you have a tattoo?
Oh, I want to answer that question.
So I have a story, actually, and that is when Chris and I started in 1992, we became astronauts on the very same day. And one of the things that you do is you go around to all the different space centers and you tour. And this was, actually, it was a long time ago, 1992. And one of the instructors that we had an earring. Now, I know that's not unusual now for a guy to have an earring, right? But back then, at a place that kind of conservative, like NASA, it was a little bit, and I said to one of the other astronauts, I said, okay, so do you think you guys could be all wearing earrings? If all the guys in the class of 1992 wore earrings, I think it could make some good statements for being modern in the space age.
We're used to it. Our former finance minister had both a ponytail and an earring, so
I like
kind
it.
of used
I like
to
it. He said, Coleman, the day you have a tattoo is the day I wear an earring. And so, you know, you have those ones you can just kind of put on there. And one time I had one like this, and I just sort of pulled my sleeve up just a little bit, and he goes, holy, whatever. Coleman has a tattoo, and the next day, there he was with an earring, magnetic.
But you are allowed to have jewelry and tattoos in space. Samantha?
I guess you are. I don't know. I didn't wear anything. I mean, I hardly wear any jewelry on the ground. So the only thing I wear are those earrings. But I really like them, and I wear them all the time. So I didn't want to bring them to space because you lose stuff in space. That's the thing you have to get used to on the space station. That stuff, guess what, floats, which is a lot of fun. That you are floating, but when everything else is floating, it can make it challenging. So I didn't want to lose them, and so I didn't even ask the question. I guess I could have, but...
But part of it, at any moment, you might have to put on an oxygen mask, because if we have a fire or a leak, and so there's some jewelry that, of course, wouldn't be cooperative with an oxygen mask or something.
What's a leak, Chris?
If we get hit by a meteorite, and suddenly there's a hole in the space station, then depending on the size of the hole, we have emergency, just like here, if there was a fire, except you can't go outside. So, so we have to be able to train for it and react for it. And so you wouldn't want your jewelry to make your mask not fit properly or tear the mask on the way on or something.
So I would maintain that if you'd practiced most of your life wearing earrings, and you had them actually, I did actually bring quite a few pairs of earrings, but they were all ones that were one single piece. Because you don't want anything that, like Chris said, that would hurt a piece of equipment, but also that would a piece would get lost and then maybe be in the space station and hurt things. But it goes okay. Yeah.
And I also want to say that you are more than welcome to take pictures or film, and feel free to share it on social media. The hashtag for det is hashtag 100 Astronauter, om ni vill använda det.
And we'll be taking pictures of you too, and doing a little social media, so...
That's encouraged. You're more than welcome, Cady. Let's look at this picture behind you. For us in here, I think it's really hard to imagine the moment when you open the airlock of your space capsule or the ship, and you're stepping out into the void. Can you describe, because you've all done spacewalks,
I'd say we've all been ready and on the team ready to do them. We don't just go out and do them casually. There has to be like basically a plan or a reason. And unfortunately on my mission, there was nothing broke. Nothing big broke outside. We were so disappointed.
So this is an exception. This is...
But Chris has.
Chris, you've done Can
I've
you
done 2
describe the
spacewalks,
feeling? Yeah. You open that airlock and you're stepping out.
Sure, so this is a guy named Ed, doing the very first American spacewalk. Spacewalks are far more dangerous than staying inside, because instead of having a ship to protect you, now you've just got the cloth of your suit to protect you. And if you look at this guy here, right here on his left shoulder, it's about plus 150 degrees Celsius. And here it's minus 140 degrees Celsius. So it's a wicked place to work. And so we train for years in order to get qualified. We train underwater, we train in a virtual reality lab. And so we only go outside very rarely. But when you do, it takes maybe 4 hours to build the suit around your body. It's kind of like a one-person spaceship. And finally, you're fully inside your suit, and then like a scuba diver, you have to pre-breathe oxygen so that you don't have troubles with the bubbles in your blood. And finally, after all that, after years of training and preparation and all the 4 hours on board, finally the moment comes, there's 2 of you floating inside the airlock, one with your head this way and the other with the head that way. It's a tiny little room, and you turn this. It's weird because there's no air, so the sound doesn't transmit. And you turn this big mechanical latch and you kind of clunk it up into place, but there's no noise. And then you push open a big fabric cover, and then you grab with both hands and pull yourself out into the universe. And it's bizarre. It'd be like if you were, I don't know, if you were in the bathroom and you opened the door to the bathroom and you stepped out and suddenly you were on a mountaintop. You know, it's like, how did I suddenly get from there to here? And it's the world itself is visually mesmerizing and overpowering, but you're, for the first time in your life, you're not on the world. You're kind of in the universe with the world. It's an amazing, breathtaking transition, and a really distracting place to work.
What is it that he's holding in his right hand?
So, if you're outside in space, early on, we didn't know how we were going to move around. And eventually, we found the best way is to put yellow handrails all over the space station. So you just go from handrail to handrail. But at first, they thought they could just use a jetpack.
What's a jetpack?
Well, a little thruster, you know, like I don't know, Buck Rogers, where you put a jetpack on your back and just fly around.
George Clooney, right?
Yeah, but when they first started here, they just thought they could hold it in their hand and they could just go and it would fly them somewhere. The trouble is, if you hold it up here, then you just do a backflip, and you can't see behind you or beside you, so it's a terrible idea. But this was an early design where they held a little thruster in their hand, but it turns out that's
They learned a lot of hard lessons.
yeah.
And you're always going out in pairs?
Yes.
Sometimes, rarely, we'll go out with 3. And early on, the very first spacewalker was 50 years ago this year. He went out alone. A few people went out alone early on. But if you get in trouble, then you're stuck. So we almost always go out as 2, so we can rescue each other if we have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Samantha, you were on a mission to ISS in 2014, and you stayed in space for almost 200 days. Setting the record for women. This is another record holder. What would you say were the most important preparations for that long journey?
Oh my gosh, it's a very long road to get to an ISS mission. Doesn't matter if it's 200 days or just a regular 5.5 months. It's a long journey. I launched at the end of 2014. And I started my training, I guess it was 2011, a little bit earlier than most people would do because I was assigned to be a reserve astronaut for a while, so I got to start a little bit earlier. And so really everything is important. Going to space is one of those things where you can't be prepared and good in one thing and then say, well, somebody else will take care of the rest. I mean, it's really a team where on most things everybody has to be ready and prepared. And that comes down to, being familiar with the space station. It becomes your workplace and also your home and also your own personal little planet, because it's what keeps you alive. I mean, when you look at Earth from space, you really have this feeling that it's our spaceship, humanity's spaceship, that brings us along on this journey through space. But you could also see it in the reverse way. When you are the 6 of us as crew members of the space station out there, then the space station is our own little planet. It has everything that keeps us alive, and so you have to be very familiar with it. You need to work. You need to know how it functions. You need to understand the language of the space station. The space station talks to you. Sometimes.
What language do you talk in the team, the 6 of you?
English or Russian.
You all know Russian?
We all speak Russian, and it's just a spontaneous call. I mean, sometimes you may join a conversation where some Russians are talking among each other, and then you just join them, and then you speak in Russian, or it might be the opposite. They join your conversation, and it happened to be in English, and then you might be switching back and forth, and then you might be speaking in Russian, but you interject some words in English, and vice versa. I mean, we call it Russlish or something like that. So it's a lot of improvising.
And you're originally Italian.
Again?
You are originally Italian.
Yes, I'm originally Italian, but nobody wants to talk Italian with me. I tried, but nobody was reacting.
But again, coming back to that 200 days, looking back for us, 200 days in the same kind of environment with strict schedules, and you're very, very prepared. Was there anything that you felt afterwards, I didn't really think I had prepared enough for this special situation or task?
You know, if there is one problem that we do not have, is not to be trained enough. We train a lot. I mean, as I said, we train for years. You know, personally, I have the feeling sometimes we even train too much. So yeah, I certainly never said, oh my gosh, I should have trained more. No, I felt really well prepared and ready.
Cady Coleman, 2010, your tenure on aboard the ISS lasted for about 159 days, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you share a special memory or some special situation from that journey?
I loved being there, and you know, when you were talking about, well, you're prepared and you have this schedule, and you know, it makes it sound like this constrained life up there, and often people think that it's a small place, and I'm hoping that you saw some of the video when you came in of how big the space station really is. It's like 10 train cars all put together, except that some of them are sticking up or out, and so it's a place where, you know, when we go up in the Soyuz, that's a small place and much smaller than, we'd have to put our chairs exactly together in order to be the size of the Soyuz. That's very small, but up there, it's just so big, and we talk about floating in space, and my hair is actually quite fun looking up in space. It's like this. Floating is boring. Flying, where just to move somewhere, it just takes the touch of a finger and you fly across the whole space station. And so for me, one of my best memories is actually just every morning I would wake up and think, I am still here. and I would open the door of my cabin and I would just, you know, give myself a little push. I'd be in my little pajamas. I mean, it's just long pants, like a long underwear you'd wear in the winter. And I'd just, you know, fly down the laboratory and I'd hook a right, and I'd go into the toilet and brush my teeth, and you know, so 3 minutes after I'm in my cabin, I'm on the microphone ready to have the first conference of the day. It's a very short commute, and I loved living in microgravity.
Mm-hmm. There's a first for everything in space, I guess. And Chris, you're famous for many things, and one of them is for being the first to play the guitar in space during your time as commander of ISS. You seem like a very playful person. What other things can you do during your free time on board? Do you have free time?
So I was not the first to play guitar in space. There have been guitars in space since the 1970s. I went to the Russian space station back in 1995 to Mir and helped build Mir. And there was an old guitar made in St. Petersburg that was on the Russian space station, and they actually brought it from an earlier space station from Salyut. So just like on Earth, if you're going to be a group of people trying to stay mentally healthy, art and music, I think, are really important. And the Russians recognize that. You need music, you need psychological support. And so the guitar is permanently on the space station. We brought it up on the NASA psychiatrists put the guitar on the space station.
But if there's no air, how can you hear the guitar?
Well, there's air on the inside.
Okay.
So, which is good.
Ready to open the hatch, you've evacuated there. Yeah.
It would be a very short stay without air. So on the inside, the pressure is basically the same as here, the air pressure. It's just noisy because all the machinery keeps you alive. You live inside the machine that keeps you alive. You don't want it to be quiet, because that means all the machinery shut down. So it's a noisy place to play guitar, but it's also a lovely place to play guitar and to write music and such. And most astronauts, especially if you're staying up a long time, 200 days, you have hobbies, you know, things that keep you interested. We're extremely busy with the science schedule, but at night. And Cady and I are musicians, and we've played together in bands for 24 years or so. We're playing tonight, actually, in a band. But, so some are musicians on board, and Cady brought a flute, and I played guitar and wrote music and sang, and then some people write. Some people do a lot of photography. You go around the world every 92 minutes. You see the whole world, so a lot of people do that. Most people have some activity that keeps them not just busy with the science and the work, but psychologically healthy also.
Samantha, what's your hobby when you're on board?
Well, I'm not a musician, unfortunately, but I did a lot of photography, took pictures, and then there's a few videos I wanted to do, explain how things work on the space station, and so that definitely kept me busy. And then keep in mind, I mean, you're actually very well connected. It's amazing. The space station is very remote and isolated if you think about physically going there and coming back from there. I mean, it's not so obvious to go to the space station and also not come back. But in terms of being connected and communication capabilities, I mean, we're amazingly well connected.
So you can be on Facebook if you want to.
We can be on the internet. Bear in mind, I mean, the internet connection is very cumbersome and clumsy, isn't it? It's not like your high-speed connection at home. But still, you know, it's something. We have access to some sort of internet. And we have email. We can talk to people on the phone. I can actually pick up the phone and call any number on the planet, including 911. I called by mistake once. It's kind of funny, and I'm like, I don't know, it's all good, don't worry. And even if I had an emergency, I thought you could help me. On the weekends, the psychological support folks, they organize conferences with our family when we can actually have two-way videos. They can see us, we can see them, we can give them a tour of the space station and stuff like that. So, you know, if you think about it, you know, sometimes people think, oh my gosh, the sport astronauts, so isolated, it must be so tough. Well, think about people on, I don't know, submarines, or who are deployed in remote areas for, you know, military operations, or, you know, even there's a lot of civilian jobs, I think, where you're actually way less connected than we are up there in the space station.
Cady, Chris said at night we play the guitar. How do you set your schedule? I mean, you're in an orbit and
And every 45 minutes it's daylight, and every 45 minutes it's nighttime. We actually just pick a time as a space station. Not the crew, but we actually operate on London time, which I think is the same time as you.
No,
maybe an hour different.
That's one.
Yeah, and so we pick London time. It's about halfway in between Russia and the U.S. in terms of time, so that neither ground team has to work all night, all the time. You know, there's certainly someone monitoring in all the different mission controls around the world, including the European Mission Control in Munich. There's a mission control in Japan, but London time seems to do it. You do, in my opinion, have to be careful before you go to bed, so to speak. It's so tempting to see one more sunrise, and you look and you go, oh, New Zealand. I haven't seen New Zealand in a bit. And so you wait till the sun comes up and you see it, and that bright sun actually physically wakes me up, and it makes it hard to go to sleep. So sometimes I have to, when it gets to be dark, that 45 minutes of dark, I have to be disciplined and go to my cabin and not look out the window.
Should we check if there are any questions? Could we get the light up a little bit? Yes, there are questions right away here.
Did you have to feel stressed out in space, like you didn't have time to do everything that you wanted to do?
Yes.
Samantha, busy schedule?
Even being up there 200 days, yes, there's many things I still wanted to do. In fact, that's funny, I wasn't supposed to be there for 200 days. I was supposed to come back a month earlier, in early May, and then we would extend it for an extra month, because a cargo resupply vehicle didn't make it, it exploded, and so, long story short, we stayed an extra month. And I was so happy, because, I mean, I was really stressed out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I still want to do this, and I want to do that, and there's not enough time. So when I got that extra month, for me, it was a huge relief. And I would have loved to stay even longer, but at least that extra month gave me that extra time to come to some peace of mind that, you know, there was time to wrap it up and go home.
What about you, Cady?
I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute. I mean, there's this, I think, an impression that you must just be so excited about coming home. To me, it was very clear, even though I have a family, I love my family, I did want to go home eventually, but Earth's going to be there. You look out the window, Earth will be there, home will be there, all the things you need to do at home and at work are going to be there. But the time that you can work in space is precious. And it takes, I think, at least about a month to become good at doing things up there, because you have to get good at, you know, the fact that things are not going to fall, and how to keep track of things, and just how to be very efficient. And it becomes just viscerally clear that the work you're doing, the science work, understanding, you know, what do liquids want to do, studying combustion. I mean, so many important things, and every minute of doing them is precious. And even the things that you do yourself, like playing music and recording it so that you can share it with people on the earth, because we get to go, but I think all of us feel responsible for bringing the work home.
Do you also feel sort of responsible for the investment that's made in you and this journey? And do you think about, I'm the chosen one, I really have to perform?
I do. And at the same time, I think you can only do your best. And I think that it's a really good thing for everyone to keep in mind when you feel pressured to perform on a test or, you know, on stage somewhere, is that if you've really done your best to be prepared and you're doing your best, no one can actually ask anything more of you. And I have a 15-year-old, and I'll say to him, you know, Mom, I'm done with my homework. And I say, so are you really ready, you know, for that? Have you really done what you need to do for your Latin test tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, I might do a little more, you know, but yeah, so I'm just going to do a little more. But, so, you know, you have to have that little look inside and know you really have done your best.
Chris, are you afraid of making mistakes?
I think that's what motivates a lot of astronauts, is the recognition that if you make a mistake, it can kill everybody. The stakes are really high. Some mistakes, of course, don't matter much, but you're all living inside an aluminum bubble off the Earth. And so what seems like a little mistake can have a really big consequence, or maybe a really big financial consequence, because the piece of hardware you're working on can be worth $1 billion. And so...
or a science consequence.
Yeah, or you may ruin someone's entire science experiment. So we take it extremely seriously. And what you don't want is an astronaut who's afraid, right? Because
it's distracting.
If you're relying on fear and your body's kind of instinctive animal reaction, you know, like adrenaline or something, then you're not going to do your job right. And so when Samantha talked about getting ready for years, part of that is so that you never get in a position where you're fearful. You want to have changed your instinctive reaction so that when something happens, instead of just being afraid, you go, oh, well, I practiced this, I visualized how it might go wrong, we practiced it as a team, we realized we didn't know what we're doing, we learned everything we needed to learn, then we practiced it again and again, and we practiced for tens of thousands of things on board, so that you're not nervous, you're not afraid, you are instead kind of confident, and then it's just a matter of making sure that you're really careful
eager to perform more.
There's also a real, you know, when you're writing an exam and you know every answer, there's a great feeling of, man, I'm doing well. There's like almost like a, you know, a wave of feeling that this is going well. And I remember when I first got to space, on my first flight, I was kind of like, am I going to be any good at this? I've trained a lot. But I did the first thing, and it went well. And then I did the second thing, and it went well. And by about the 50th thing, I'm like, I know what I'm doing. And there's this great wave of confidence and competence. And it's a wonderful feeling, in amongst having the whole world pour by and being weightless, which is just, it would be so much fun if we were all weightless in here right now. So you could fly around, and that whole mixture is really wonderful, and that's probably why nobody wants to, you know, we're not dying to come home. It's sort of an intoxicating, addictive combination.
Let's see if we can have some more questions. There are lots of hands.
Okay, so I'm gonna be taking a picture of the audience here, and I want to see hands up. Oh,
this
much
is
better.
how enthusiastic we are.
That is so very good. Thank you.
So who's first? I think we have a question here.
Good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oscar, you
we
distribute.
have a microphone out there.
Yeah. Okay, can I have a question? It's also about the responsibility as you as astronauts, because you're not only scientists and astronauts, you're also parts of huge military structures, military organizations in the United States, in Italy, in Canada. And when you discuss the space trips and the space programs, you made us to think that this is only for the benefit of the mankind, the inventions will be used for a better future, but isn't there a risk that these inventions are also used for waging war more effectively on the Earth? And isn't that a conflict for you? And I wondered, you also cooperate with astronauts from other countries, and today you are friends and cooperate, but maybe if you get the orders tomorrow, you have to kill them. That's a hard question. Thank you.
So the space station is 100% civilian. The space station is completely civilian.
The ISS.
It is not a military place. It's a research laboratory. And so what you're saying is not true.
Yeah.
Before I became an astronaut, I was a fighter pilot. And I flew F-18s, and I used to intercept armed Soviet bombers that were practicing cruise missile launches on North America. Really serious business in the height of the Cold War. And just 7 or 8 years later, I was part of an international crew of German, Russian, Canadian, American, flying a reusable American spaceship with a Canadian arm to build part of the Russian space station collectively. And to me, that's better. That was a really important step. And there's always going to be conflict on the surface of the world. But that doesn't mean that we don't do research. And it doesn't mean that we don't explore. And right now, you can go outside in the morning or the evening and watch the space station go over. And to me, what's beautiful about that is any kid on Earth, no matter where they live, no matter what's good circumstance or bad, they can go outside and watch an unquestionable example of global cooperation for peaceful purposes. And I think it's probably one of the best examples we have of all the things that we do together.
I agree.
We have a question in the front.
How does it feel to come back to Earth after being in space?
Sam's our most recently returned,
Yeah.
just a
You
couple
came back
months ago.
You came back a few weeks ago, right?
Well, it's been 3 months. It ain't good. I didn't like it. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. The trip back is amazing. I mean, I just loved flying the Soyuz back from the space station to Earth. It's an amazing trip, especially, in those last 40, 45 minutes. It's like the most incredible, I don't know if you like roller coaster rides. Do you like roller coaster rides? You don't? Seriously? No, they can't be. You're just being shy. Everybody likes roller coaster rides. It's the best roller coaster ride that you can possibly imagine. So, you're up there on orbit, and, initially, of course, you're weightless. And then you give a small, you just brake a tiny little bit with the engines of the Soyuz, and that's enough to make you start to lower your orbit, to come down lower, and eventually you hit the atmosphere. And the atmosphere starts to slow you down and slow you down more and more, and then eventually you hit the denser parts of the atmosphere when there is more air, and then you really start to brake a lot. And you brake so much that you generate a lot of heat, and it becomes really hot, to the point where you are some ball of fire coming down through the sky. In fact, looking out of your window, you can see flames. You are in what we call plasma. It's really, really hot gases. And what you're feeling inside is that all of a sudden you've been weightless for like many, many months, and then all of a sudden you feel all this weight and pressure on you. In fact, it was really strange because we have a G meter in the Soyuz that shows you the acceleration. So when it says 1, it means that your weight is just the same as it is normally on Earth. And so we started coming in, and I already felt so heavy, and I felt this incredible force pressing down in the seat, and I look up, and it was like 0.7 Gs. So I only had like 70% of my weight, and it already felt so awful, in terms of all this pressure on you. And of course it goes up to, I think we had 4 Gs, so all of a sudden I was feeling like 4 times my weight, but to me it felt more like 500 tons. You know, and so you know, you come down and you try to take a peek outside, and all of a sudden this picture of the Earth is completely new and different than it has been, because for a long time you've been at 400 kilometers, and so the Earth is at a certain distance, and it's so familiar to you. It's like your backyard in your house, and you're used to it being a certain way. And then you're coming down lower, and it looks more and more like being on an airplane. All of a sudden it's so close, and I'm like, that's weird. And then eventually the parachute opens, and that's like one big shock. I mean, you know, it's just like this one big shock, and the parachute opens, and you're actually really happy that the parachute opens. It's like the one last things that you know, after that you know that you'll probably be fine and you're gonna be safe. And after the parachute opens, you're like shaken around again, an incredible roller coaster ride until the capsule kind of settles down beneath the parachute. And then you float very peacefully for several minutes. You get into contact with the rescue folks, and they start telling you how you are, and it's really nice and comforting. You know, you know that they're watching you, they see you coming down, and then eventually they tell you, you know, you're like 500 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters, 200 meters, prepare for landing, boom. And it's this big impact with the ground. We were lucky, in my case, I don't know you guys, it was a wonderful day, very little wind, so we were not dragged around after we landed.
Where was this? Where did you land?
We landed in Kazakhstan, which I've seen many pictures of landing, and there's 2 versions of Kazakhstan. It's either white, because it's covered in snow, or it's like desertic, arid, like reddish, brownish. Where our landing, if you see the pictures of our landing, you know that it was our landing because it's green. So it had been raining for like an entire month, and so it was this green stuff. It's just beautiful. To the point where the people were even worried that we might land in water, because there were so many ponds that had built because of the water, and so they were even ready to like airlift our capsule with a helicopter. Luckily, it didn't happen. We landed on solid ground, no wind, so we landed upright, and we stopped shaking almost immediately. I bumped my nose and my helmet real hard, but that was it. So it wasn't too bad.
And then what happens, Chris? Are there precautions when sort of opening, when coming out? Is something...
So, what's your name?
Alex.
Do you want to come up on stage, Alex? Because I could use a model to help explain. You want to come up with us? Alex is going to help me answer this question. Come on up, Alex. Just stand right here if you would. No, stand up. So, our bodies are designed for gravity. It's nice to meet you, Alex. Thank you for asking me. Nice shirt. Our bodies are designed for gravity, right? And if you look at body design, I think it's really interesting. Have you ever thought about why your eyeballs are up here? Like, it's really stupid, you'd think, right? Because you've got this big, strong chest cavity with ribs. Why did we put the eyeballs up here? Shouldn't they be like looking out of Alex's chest, be a lot more controlled? But I think it's because you want to see danger in the distance. So you want to have your eyes as high as possible. And then the optic nerve, there's so much data going between the optic nerve and your brain. That means your brain has to be up here too. Otherwise, you could be like a crab or something with your eyeballs up here. But we get so much information that we have to have our brain up here. And then the brain has to be protected. So now you need this big helmet of a skull around it. And then, here, turn your head. You got to be able to look for danger. So now you need this big swiveling mechanism. So it's really complicated for Alex's body to fight gravity and to keep all that stuff on the top. And so our body's built for it. Here, turn around. There you go. So he's got this whole skeleton here. That is, and the big hip cradle, and the big leg bones, and a balance system that keeps him from falling over. And here, turn around. Close your eyes. And look, he can balance with his eyes closed. So it's not vision that tells us which way's up, it's this whole balance system. And his heart is constantly like a conveyor belt, lifting blood up to his head, and gravity shoving it down to his feet. Really complicated system. So that as soon as Alex gets adapted to space, all of that kind of changes, and you float, and you get a whole different shift of fluid, and your balance system changes. So when Samantha comes crashing back to Earth, bang on the ground, lying on your back, now your body is all messed up. Alex's balance system has forgotten how to hold him up. So the only way he can balance is to have his eyes wide open. His heart has forgotten how to fight gravity. All the little delicate systems that squeeze the blood up to keep his brain lubricated up here, all those systems. So if he stands up, he'll faint. So we have to wear a thing that squeezes our calves and our thighs and our belly. It's like holding the bottom of a balloon to keep the
And the
blood.
rescue team immediately puts that on you?
But part of it, no, we wear it all the way home. And then also, all the doctors, they want to understand our body better. And so they don't want us to get up and walk and run away because it starts changing our body. And so they'll actually carry us around and keep us flat so that they can start taking blood and urine and spit and everything else to try and measure how our bodies readapt.
So you're on a stretcher or something?
Yeah, they put you in like a chair and then they carry you and they lie you down. And then you feel sick. You feel dizzy. And some people feel more nauseous than others. Most people throw up because you're so confused inside. But after a few hours, you start to feel okay. After a couple days, your heart can keep up. You can take your squeezy G-suit off. After about 2 weeks, you're sort of feeling normal again. I don't know how it was for you ladies, but it took me about a month to really feel like myself. And it took about 4 months before I could run properly, where it really felt like running. And then it took me about 1.5 years to grow my skeleton back because I lost a lot of bone across my hip and my upper thighs just because of the exercise equipment we have up there. So it's a long process coming back, but it was a good question.
Did you have any more question, Alex?
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So do you notice any changes to your mind when you're back? Like any post-space syndrome in terms of mental state?
It's a little bit harder, and it's hard to explain this in a positive way sometimes, but, you know, on my jacket here you see my patches, and these are my space shuttle flights, and then here, these are my 2 space station flights, you know, so you're part of actually 2 crews of 6, because you know where there's 3 people up there, and then 3 more come. Now we're 6, so that's 1 patch. And then 3 go home, 3 more come, that's another patch. So these are the...
And they're numbered.
And they're numbered in terms of expeditions. So I was expedition 26 and 27. Chris was 34, 35, and
42, 43.
42, 43. And so, you know, we're all from different expeditions. But then you also see the patch on my jacket from the United States. And I'm very proud to be from my country. But it's just really hard to, when I look down at the Earth, it just doesn't actually make sense to think about a single place that I'm from, or that it's, you know, I'm from that place and you're from that place. We're all from this place. And so in some ways, you know, I didn't, if I was going to pick my shirt, I didn't actually always wear one with my country on it, because it just didn't quite make sense to me, because I felt so much a citizen of the Earth.
Mm-hmm. And are you surveyed coming back with equipment measuring your health and your mental state for a long time after the return?
Yes, for at least a couple of weeks. It's medical. They want to make sure that you're okay, and so they monitor you on different aspects. And you know, your flight surgeon, my flight surgeon basically almost lived with me for a couple of weeks and daily made sure that I was doing okay. But then there is the science aspect. So we are very much, a lot of the science that we do up there nowadays is really human physiology. So as Chris was saying, with the help of Alex, our body is really adapted to live and function in gravity. And then, of course, you know, it means that it's harder when you come back to gravity after you've adapted to weightlessness. But it's also an opportunity to learn a lot about how the human body works, by taking that gravity away, which is so much a part of how we have evolved to be, and to go up there where the effects of gravity is still there, by the way, that's why we can be on orbit, otherwise we would be flying free in space. But because we're on orbit, flying around the Earth, all the effects of gravity are switched off. So it's like the space station is this anti-gravity machine. And so you expose the body to this situation where gravity effects are not there anymore. And all of a sudden you see the body adapt at all levels. Even a tiny little cell, that was amazing to me. I'm not a doctor or a life science person. I'm an engineer and a pilot, so all that stuff was very new to me when they started to explain it. But we had an experiment where we would look at single cells and how they respond to the fact that they're weightless. And believe it or not, they do respond. Because cells have like a three-dimensional structure, and when they become weightless, they actually change the way they're organized inside. Each and every cell of your body changes in that way. And the change in shape means a change in function, and that cascades into so many changes at all levels of your body. You know, we talked about bone, muscle, but even immune system, cardiovascular system, everything readapts to this new condition of weightlessness, which means that we can really understand by going to space how our bodies are really evolved to function, and some mechanisms that we didn't even understand or knew they existed, now we can finally study, observe, understand. And that of course has a lot of implications in terms of diagnostics, therapy, just keeping ourselves healthy on the ground. And I forgot what the original question was.
we have medicals.
If you are monitored.
Oh yeah, so going back to that. So because of that, we do a lot of research on the human body in space. And so we are the guinea pigs, we are the subjects. And they want to see how our body adapts in space. And then when we come back, they want to observe the readaptation back to Earth. So we keep having sessions of all those experiments until the scientists are happy, because we're going back to baseline. And so they have observed that change in both directions.
But it's
you have
actually,
retired, but they still monitor you.
for all astronauts, it's for the rest of your life. Because there's been so few of us fly in space. Maybe all of us will live longer. Or maybe all of us will go blind. Or maybe we'll all die of cancer. Or we don't know. So there's been so few of us fly in space that we want to know what the long-term effects are. If not more often, we go for a complete physical and check to see what it is that the long-term effects of spaceflight do to the human body.
I mean, this is about, going to Mars. We'd like to go to Mars, but what if you got there and you found you just couldn't stand up or lift weights or build your house there? We need to understand how the human body reacts to space. So that's for space reasons, but there's real fascinating and important Earth reasons and Earth information we get as well, where, how older people can lose bone and then more easily break their bones. It's called osteoporosis. Well, when we're in space, if we do nothing, then we lose bone 10 times faster.
You mean not exercise?
Not exercise. So no, yeah, exactly. No exercise. Then we lose bone 10 times faster than a woman who's 70 years old who has osteoporosis. So the amount of bone that she loses in about a year.
I just don't say benskörhet in Swedish.
Mm-hmm. And then I lose in 1 month. So it happens so fast to us. That's kind of the bad news. But the good news is that in general, we're very physically healthy without a lot of complicating, confusing conditions. And so then, because it's happening so fast, it's easier to measure than in a woman who is 70 years old and maybe has other complicating things. So we're taking blood, urine, all sorts of tests. We're testing drugs. We're looking at diet, looking at the amount of salt in our diet. We're looking at things like vitamin D. Does that help you have strong bones? So that's just one example of how the research that we do in a place where suddenly we take away one very big variable, gravity, helps us understand life back here.
Did you feel fit? Did you feel like rested when you woke up in the morning?
On a spaceship, there's all those experiments to do, and we've tried to say, how much exercise do you need every day? And what we've settled on is about 2 hours. And we have 3 different pieces of exercise equipment. We have a bicycle, but it's more like a unicycle because it doesn't have a seat, because you're weightless. It's kind of funny. And you can bicycle once around the world.
You know how the seat can be the most terrible part of the bicycle, right?
Yeah, no seat. So it's nice. And then we have a treadmill, and there's big elastics that hold us down on the treadmill. And then there's a resistive exercise machine. And we alternate between them about 2 hours a day. And then the rest of the day, you're either doing experiments or fixing broken things on the spaceship. And you end up this alarm on my watch would go off at 6 o'clock every morning. And typically I'd go to bed about midnight or 1 in the morning. And I was busy the whole time, every single day. So I would fall asleep exhausted and then wake up every morning. I don't know what it was like for you guys, but the way my eyes work, you know how you sometimes have a little thing in your eye when you wake up that you need to rub the sleeper out of your eye? Some mornings I'd wake up and both my eyes would be glued shut. Just by because nothing had drained during the night. It was so weird to wake up and have to like pry my eyes open to get the sleepers out of my eyes. But no, you wake up rested, and once you get adapted to weightlessness, you feel a little bit like Superman, because you can fly everywhere. You can just whiz around. You're like Spider-Man, you know, going around the corners, and so there's a great, wonderful freedom to it, and you feel very adapted to being a weightless creature.
Weightlessness and zero gravity is just so fascinating. How many of you have seen the movie Gravity? Okay. Cady, you trained Sandra Bullock for her role in that film. How did you show her, how did you make her feel the challenges of being in zero gravity?
Well, if you haven't been there, it's really hard to see it and feel it. And so actually, I tried to create an image in her mind. And can I demonstrate on you?
Oh, definitely.
So basically, you have the right equipment. Sorry, and that is that I took one. If you take one hair from your head, and I won't actually pull out your hair.
You can.
But so take one hair. So pretend I have a hair right here. It's very thin, and if you take it and you just push it really hard, you would break that hair. But if you just do it sort of gently, and I take that one piece of hair and I push slowly, I will push myself across the whole space station. That is how much force it takes. So when you think about people grabbing and going, and we don't need to do that. It's really just one little touch, you know, just like a little pinky, and you learn to adjust yourself. I think we can tell when we look at people living on the space station kind of how long they've been there, because they become just like graceful fish. I mean, there's just a fluidity to it. So she and I talked a lot about how to move up there and how little force it took. And even the fact that you use your feet quite a bit to, when you want to be in one place, you know, that we have handrails. And I did that. I'll try to be a little more still. So we have handrails, and if you want to stay in one place, you actually have to kind of hook on with your feet if you want to be able to use both hands, which usually we do for doing experiments. So we talked about those things, and also a little bit about what it was like to live in a place far away where everyone you love is far away, and you can't go there whenever you'd like, and how do you stay connected, and how do you hold them close.
Was she realistic in the movie?
The movie itself, you know, there's things that are not correct in the movie that defy the laws of physics. But to me, it just wasn't important how correct it was. It's about the fact that, you know, Samantha and Chris and I got to go to space, and I'm hoping, and I'm looking at the younger faces in the room, that some of you will be going, because it's certainly possible.
Should we take a check? How many of you want to go?
I mean, and you're right to want to go, because it's so amazing. But not everyone in this room will probably go. And that movie took people to space. And I really loved that. And there's another movie coming out that I'm hoping, it's not that I'm sort of trying to say this is the best movie ever. I haven't actually seen it yet. I've only read the book. But I spend my entire day, every day, planning for Mars. Seriously. I work in the office of the chief technologist at NASA, and we are trying to make sure that our space station, we're doing all sorts of experiments that help us understand how do we recycle the water, how do we recycle the air, how do we make sure people are healthy, all those kinds of things, because going to Mars is real. And likely it will be one of the folks that is on the younger side that would be able to go, but we will be going. We as humans are already there, and that we are the ones who build the robots and the rovers. They don't build themselves, they don't program themselves. People are present in that way on the planet Mars, and we'll be going. And I think this new movie about the Martian, I think will show you a few of the things that we think about really hard.
Cool. Can we have more questions? Yes. You distribute with the microphone. There's one down here. We should do them in the back as well. Yes, Chris.
Short question.
We'll do one here and then one in the back.
I just wondered...
where are you?
I'm here. I just wondered, the first day of this week, I heard a lot of older people of my generation talk about how much the moon landing inspired them to become space interested or astronauts. But nowadays, is the interest going down since there aren't something like the moon landing? Or
you meet students and people every...
Yeah, I served as an astronaut. Cady and I, as she mentioned, hired the same day. So I served in the astronaut office for 21 years. And because I'm Canadian, there's very few Canadian astronauts. And so probably 2 or 3 weekends a month I would go speak in schools across Canada. So over that time, I don't know what the math is, maybe 1,000 schools. And I think people have a false view of the past. Like there was this great rosy period where everything was perfect and everybody was motivated. People forget, even before Neil and Buzz walked on the moon, they were canceling moon landings. And by Apollo 12, people were no longer interested in spaceflight. And, you know, if you're trying to entertain people by flying in space, you're going to lose. It's not, we don't explore the universe as an entertainment thing. Sometimes what we do is entertaining, but the fundamental nature of exploration is ancient and basic to all of us. And having spoken in all of those schools, I think as you get older, you start to think that everybody feels just like you. And you forget what it's like to be 10, to be Alex's age, and to be fascinated by the opportunities that exist for you. And the conclusion, and I still talk to schools several times a week, my conclusion is, just because I'm getting older doesn't mean everybody else in the world is now in their mid-50s. And that same burning interest is just as strong. People are just motivated by different things. Science fiction, science fantasy, people living on the space station. What we saw in Pluto in July, I mean, that's amazing. We just discovered 2 weeks ago that one of the moons of Saturn is a rock that is completely surrounded by water. It is a global ocean on Enceladus, and it's covered in ice, and there's so much heat inside Enceladus that it has hot water geysers that are spewing out to space that are feeding the rings of Saturn. We discovered that last week. There's a lot of really cool, interesting stuff, and we're starting to see planets around other suns. We've seen over 1,000 planets around other suns, so we have a reasonable shot in the next few years of actually finding life somewhere else out in the universe. So I don't think human curiosity has changed, nor the desire to explore. I just think once in a while something we do in the space business is just really sort of entertaining also.
Let's take a question here, and then Oscar, can you serve the audience in the back and be fair to them and bring the microphone back? Please tell us your name.
Stellan. How do you become, and how long time does it take to become an astronaut?
Very good question, because we didn't get to that yet. Should we talk about training and what do you need? What kind of background do you have? How do you get into the astronaut program?
Well,
would you like to start since you're European?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. There's different backgrounds to become astronauts, but most of us have some type of background in some technical or scientific field. And it can be engineering, it can be math, it can be physics, it can be biology. Cady's a chemist. And or we have a background in flying. Like Chris has a lot of experience as a military pilot, as a test pilot. I have a little bit of experience as a military pilot. Before that, I studied engineering in college, so I'm kind of a mixed thing. I'm an engineer by education, and then I became a military pilot. But the important thing I would say is that most of us have sort of had this dream of going to space since we were children. Can you say that? And so, in a way, we have worked all our life toward that goal, and it starts really probably your age or even younger, and it's about trying to do your best at what you're doing, which in your case nowadays is about going to school, and maybe as you grow up, maybe try to make choices that put you on the right path, like trying to do something that brings you towards science and engineering, or maybe flying, whatever really sparks your passion. Because if you do something that you're passionate about day by day, then guess what? You're going to be really good at it. And being really good at what you do is a really good start to be a good candidate to become an astronaut.
Is there a European space program? I mean, what did you actually, what training did you actually do? I mean, the formal astronaut training, what was that in your case?
Well, so I was selected in 2009, and there was a European-wide selection process through the European Space Agency. So one day they said, hey, Europe, we want new astronauts, and go to this website and fill out this application. And a bunch of people did, over 8,000 throughout Europe or ESA member states. And then 6 of us were selected from different nationalities and different backgrounds. So to go back to your question, out of the 6 of us, 4 of us are pilots, either civilian or military. A few of us are engineers, which can be pilots as well. One is purely an engineer, and one is purely a scientist. But to the ones of you who are considering becoming astronauts through that path, I also have to mention our engineering colleague, who is Antti Mogensen, who just got back from the space station, first Danish astronaut. He spent several years on oil rigs offshore in Kenya. Our pure scientist, who is Alex Geras, the German, who just got back from the space station about less than a year ago. Again, pure scientist, but he spent a couple of or several months over a couple of expeditions in Antarctica. So those are all places. Antarctica especially is a traditional space analog, and I believe Cady can talk to you about it. She spent a bunch of time in Antarctica too. But I would say even an oil rig, you probably don't make an immediate connection between an oil rig and space. But it's a place which has some danger to it. It's a place where you have to be in a confined space with a bunch of people. It's a place where you have to follow rules and procedures, otherwise can become dangerous and people can die. It's a place that you might have to evacuate one day, and so you have to train to do something like that, to keep a cool mind in a dangerous situation, so that everybody gets out of that safe. So if you are somebody who's not interested in a military career, like the gentleman before, I gather, or you're not interested in flying, so you do want to pursue maybe becoming an astronaut via engineering or science, then I would suggest do something like that. Do something that shows that you are able to work in an environment, that you're a stellar scientist and a stellar engineer, but you can also work in what we would call an operational type of environment. So, but back to your question, training. So we were selected in 2009. We went through basic training at the European Space Agency. That's a crash course in a bunch of things like life sciences and space sciences and a little bit of electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, space operations. So they basically give you short crash courses in all of the science and engineering disciplines that are relevant to space flight. So in a way, guess what? You go back to school. And after that, you start to becoming more hands-on on mock-ups and simulators of the space station, of the robotic arm, of the space vehicles that we fly, of the cargo vehicles that we're gonna, in a way, operate when we are on the space station, but everything at a very basic level, and that's why we call it basic training. Plus Russian language training, survival trainings, what we call human behavior and performance training. That's when they give you some skills and expertise and and they put you in a hands-on situation where you can practice teamwork and communication and problem solving and stress management and conflict management, all stuff like that will come in handy on the space station for sure. And then eventually, hopefully you get assigned to a space flight, and then again you get into those 2.5 or even 3 years, if you're a rookie, years of training that at the end of which there is a rocket waiting for you.
Mm-hmm. Did that answer your questions, Stellan? You still have time. Who's in the back and wants to? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. My question is, what was your main aim when you go to the universe, and have you succeeded your aim? This is my question.
What was your aim, your goal? What was it that you hoped to accomplish, Katie? Maybe that will be our last question. It's a really good question. What your overall ambition was?
Well, I'll just give a short answer, and maybe other folks want to give their short answer as well. I think people were meant to explore. We live on the spaceship Earth. All of us are space travelers on this spaceship. There are other places out there, and my goal was to be part of exploration, to make a difference where I knew that we when I was finished, which I'm not finished yet, but that we are further towards our goal of exploring our universe, and I'm very excited that we are.
My goal was.
Can we get the hand mic to it?
My goal was to help explore the rest of the universe and to challenge myself to make the absolute most of what I could do. And I think it's a wonderful thing in life if you can find the motivation to push your personal limits right to the edge. How well could I possibly do this thing? Like an Olympic athlete, training, but in this case, right across the board. How much can I use my brain? How can I train myself so that I can contribute as much to this as possible? But then also, how can I use that experience to help other people as much as I can? How can the things that we learned, whether it's talking about osteoporosis, straight scientific results, but also what Samantha's talking about, to prepare to fly a rocket ship is really intense. And the way that we learn to deal with danger and not be afraid, the way you learn to study for something, there's ways that we learn how to do things that are useful to everybody. So then a large part, I think, of the experience is not just keeping it to yourself, but then finding a way to have it benefit as many other people as possible. And so sharing the experience, I think, is a vital part of the responsibility also.
Did you have this dream when you were young, that you wanted to be an astronaut?
Yes, I did, and that was probably the one thing that I wanted to add. I agree with everything that Cady and Chris said, but I also have to say my probably greatest drive going to space is that it was my dream since I was a child. So it wasn't even a conscious choice. Sometimes I say it wasn't me choosing space, it was space choosing me. And so I always had this really strong drive inside me. So I will be very honest, I mean, especially in terms of my first space flight, my main aim was to fulfill this dream.
We do have time for some more questions. Yes, please distribute the microphone. We have, I don't know how you want to do it.
Maybe they can yell them out at the end here to go faster. Yeah?
Yeah. Oscar?
Well, the thing is that I saw a video of you, Samantha, where you opened a sort of a window with just a wow. And that is pretty amazing since no leaks were opened. And I wonder how that is possible.
I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat the question?
I think it's talking about the shutters.
Yeah, the window shutters.
Yeah.
Shutters. Well, actually, I will refer you back to that video because it's a very extensive video and explains exactly that. But it's a really good video. And I don't know all the details. I mean, I watched the video myself, but the best thing is really to watch the video. It's called. It's part of a series. It's called Smarter Every Day, and I was a big fan of this series of videos. And then guess what? One day, that's one of the cool things about being astronauts. Sometimes people that you're really a fan of, they become fan of yours, and then they kind of reach out to you. And I'm like, wow, I'm a huge fan of yours. And I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan of yours. Cool. So this guy who's called Destin, he reached out to me while I was on the space station because he was doing this video about the cupola shutters. So the cupola is this. Probably everybody's favorite place on the space station. It's like this little module, which is basically one big window. It's actually 7 windows, and it points to Earth, and that's where most of those magnificent pictures that you see that actually show the curvature of the Earth and space are taken from. And of course, we can't keep the windows open all the time. There is the risk of like micrometeorites impacting. There is a risk when we have a vehicle arriving or departing, they fire their engines, and so we don't want the combustion gases to impact on the windows and stain them or damage them. So we have shutters that we can close. And so really, literally, is one of the duties we had on board. We had like the duty. We called it like that, the duty that everybody had for 1 week, and it actually entailed a number of duties, but one of the duties was like to make sure that the shutters of the cupola were closed every night, before people went to bed. Shutter duty, yeah. And so it has a knob like that you turn, and it's actually an amazing system because you're literally like turning this knob, and it's very light, and you're closing the shutter on the outside. And so what the young gentleman, what's your name? Soros. What Soros was, I'm probably butchering your name, I'm sorry.
was talking about is that it's amazing because you're really turning this knob, and then there's this shaft which is connected to the outside, and there's this shutter, and so it's amazing because it's a movable part, and you're not inducing a leak. You're still keeping all your air inside. So anyway, Destin from Smarter Every Day wanted to do a video about how those shutter closing mechanisms work, and so since the cupola was built in Italy, I was an Italian astronaut, I still am. He said, why don't you do a quick video? And so I did a little contribution for this video, but then he actually interviewed the engineer who designed the system, and he shows you the schematics and everything, so I recommend watching the video.
Let's take some more questions. We have to work the floor faster, Oscar. I'll take it from you and I'll repeat it. Just go.
Thank you. My question is that this. Because if people have seen Interstellar, they will understand what I'm talking about. It's like an effect. People living on the Earth, two twins, one living on the Earth and one outside in the space. And when the one outside came back, they didn't have the same age. How are you going to explain that?
What was that question?
So I think the question is about aging relative to speed, right? About whether we age differently. And the faster and faster you go, time passes at a different rate. So if you went to space and went close to the speed of light and then came back to Earth, you would be younger than the people on Earth, just because of relativity. And actually we do the math on the space station. On the space station, we're only going 8 kilometers a second. It's nowhere near the speed of light. But it is slightly different than the speed at which you would age on the Earth. And on the space station, it's about 1 millisecond a month. So after 6 months on the space station, I was 6 milliseconds younger than the people back on Earth. So that much younger. But when we go faster, it'll actually make a difference, and we'll be able to see it. And we, as you say, we explore it in movies right now, or in some songs like 39 by Queen. We talk about time, space travel, and how it will affect aging. But for now, we just don't go quite fast enough to make anything more than just a flash of a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you go and I'll repeat. Have you done something silly, like a practical joke in space?
Oh, actually, we did a little one, which was, I don't know if you've seen our robot up there. His name, he just sort of looks like a guy, is Robonaut. And it came in a giant refrigerator-sized box. I mean, it's like, this big. And it was really a very special occasion that, Robonaut came up in a Japanese supply ship, came up to the space station, and one day we were going to undo all of the screws and the bolts and, unpack him, and there was going to be television, and, it was just very exciting, and also lots of lessons learned about how to bring something so big to space, because Robonaut is like bigger than Chris and I put together. He's very, very large. But we just decided that they were so excited that we would play this little joke, and the night before, we undid all 32 of the screws, and we took him out, and we put him somewhere else in the space station, as if he was already, controlling the space station, and then we put the lid back on, and we screwed in all 32 of those little screws, and then we did the whole thing the next day on a lot of television, and when we opened the box, and there was no robot. And then we went and we found him on the space station, and I was told that I should not explore acting as my new career. But I think everybody
leave that
liked it.
to Samantha. Sandra Bullock. Unfortunately, I think we could be in here with you for a long time. They love feedback. Hand up if you feel inspired. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Where are you off to now? What's the rest of the program?
Actually, we're playing music tonight, which should be fun, I think, as a fundraiser, and we'll be together. We only get together for a week every year.
This is all the people that have been to space.
People that have been more than 100 kilometers up and gone around the world once. Then you can join the club. And there are only 400 of us that have joined, and we only get together for 1 week a year. So we have lectures, and we talk to each other, and we visit schools, and we compare notes. And so at the end of the week, we'll spread back over the whole world again. But it's a really lovely week together.
And we do this in different countries. This year it's Sweden, we've been to Saudi Arabia, we've been to China. And, as a group, we're usually about 100 of the people who've been to space are coming to these congresses. And it's like a family. We all know each other, or we get to know each other because we've shared something very, very special. But then also, I think we go someplace and we learn things. Something that's very interesting to me being in Scandinavia is the importance of design and using the design principles, and innovation and just the different things that you take for granted about the way you live and the way you think. We get to come and see a little bit of that and think about how it relates to the rest of the world. So it's been very wonderful for us to be here in Sweden. We still have a lot to see. We're going to go to Saab and to the military bases in Växjö. And to see some glass, but then we're also sharing talks with each other about the future of the space program, and with the public as we go. And so I think it's interesting for the public, and it's interesting for us.
Thank you so much for being with us.